Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. You guys know the stock market is now breaking out into new all-time highs. Bitcoin is moments away from making another new all-time high for the third time this cycle. And as all of this is coming to a close, we're seeing institutional involvement like never before. This is the perfect storm that we've talked a lot about for the last few years, talking about what happens when the retail money actually pairs with all of the institutional demand that we're seeing. And I do believe that we're moments away from seeing the finalization of this. We are going to see the biggest, most expansive bull run that we've ever seen in our cycles, paired with all of this new money, and I have the most important charts that I wanted to share with you guys to break it all down as far as what to expect moving forward over the rest of this year. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty everybody, here we are to jump into today's video, and I want to start out with Bitcoin. We're going to run through Bitcoin, and then we're going to be finishing up by taking a look at the total market of altcoins and everything else in there. It's super important that we're knowing what to pay attention for in these times, as Bitcoin is making that big push, as the stock market is breaking out. We are moments away from seeing all of this new liquidity entering back into the market, and that's why I think that we have to do our part by being prepared and positioned in the right way so that we can truly capitalize on all of this. If we come in here and look at Bitcoin in the shorter time frames, Bitcoin is managing to find a little bit of resistance right here. We have reacted 3 different times to this downtrending resistance, and we have rejected a couple times. However, when I'm watching Bitcoin currently, even with us pulling back here, I wouldn't be surprised if we came back down just under $104,000 to around the $103,500 mark before we bottom, and then that's finally where we're going to get that breakout outside of this resistance. There's also a little bit more of a bearish scenario where maybe we come back down a little bit lower and actually retest 101. Those are my 2 scenarios that I see playing out for Bitcoin. Either we're going to get one more retest of near this horizontal support at around 101, a little over, or 103, just under 104 is going to be that support before we break out. Regardless, I am looking at all of this as just a higher time frame consolidation before we end up getting, continuation into new all-time highs. Consolidation underneath the resistance level is always bullish, specifically when you're already in an established uptrend, right? Bitcoin's been going up for the last 3 years. Everybody knows that. And we did just manage to come right back in here and tag this all-time high. In fact, we've made a new all-time high. So this entire move was us just building that support before we can get into price discovery. So the fact that we're just consolidating right below this prior all-time high at about 107, 109, in my eyes, it's only a matter of time before this thing does actually end up breaking out. And the big thing to be aware of is once this breaks out, it's literally clear skies ahead. And I do firmly believe that we're going to see Bitcoin really start to pick up on this next breakout, considering it's important to understand where we're at in the bigger time frames so that we understand just why this next move coming is going to be so massive. Remember, this was the all-time high of our last cycle, 65K, 69K, and then when we started to run really quickly with all of the institutions that started to get involved with Bitcoin, basically at the beginning and the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, what we ended up seeing was Bitcoin rallied and hit this prior all-time high and then consolidated. When we finally made another new all-time high, we managed to go all the way from 66 to about 109, and then we pulled back and pretty much just retested this prior all-time high from the beginning of 2024, as well as this prior high from our last cycle being 69 and 65K. So with us just mainly consolidating, I don't think that we've seen any sort of big expansive price action like we were accustomed to seeing in our bull cycles, considering Bitcoin is really just still getting to the point of finally lifting off, right? Remember, we had this big breakout right here. We were unable to get that confirmed breakout, and we ended up holding resistance below those prior all-time highs. And we consolidated here for about half a year or more. And as we consolidated, we were building that support before that next breakout. I was anticipating that once we broke out of this prior all-time high, Bitcoin was probably just going to run really quickly and we would see some more price action like this. Obviously, that wasn't the case, and Bitcoin ended up making its breakout and then pulling right back down onto that prior high. So all this was a higher time frame support and resistance flip. Sometimes when you break out of an all-time high, it'll just go vertical, like what we ended up seeing in the last cycle down here. We had been in this big triangle type of consolidation for the whole cycle pretty much. And then it was once we finally managed to get a breakout outside of this downtrending resistance, we flipped it as support, And this is a lot of the same type of price action that we're seeing in my opinion. Obviously, this support and resistance flip is way below the prior all-time high, but it's still the same significance of a breakout. This was a triangle consolidation, so breaking out of the triangle and retesting it has the same level of significance as us being below a prior all-time high, breaking out of it, and then retesting it. It's both showing the same correlations, and I do believe that what comes next is Bitcoin rallying all the way up here to about 150 to potentially even 200,000 per Bitcoin. And I'm not exaggerating that. I really think that this is the moment where, we've been spending all of this 3-year period just going up, steadily increasing in value. This is really just the beginning of the parabolic curve. The blow off top phase is what comes next, and that's where things are going to get really blown out of proportion. The institutions have already been here. They've already been accumulating. Michael Saylor has taught them the magic trick where you can just issue more stocks and then you can use that stock to buy more Bitcoin and then keep the Ponzi cycle kind of continuing to go up. This is something that a lot of other companies are now starting to, kind of back, and they're going to start investing their own money into Bitcoin reserves. And as this happens, I do think that the retail money is just a matter of time before it follows and starts picking up. But there hasn't been any price action to really stimulate a significant amount of retail. There has been a meme coin craze. There was a layer 2 cycle to begin this bull run down in here. But for the most part, when we're talking what's really going to excite retail, we haven't seen the same level of euphoria that we were expecting to see over in here. Because remember, during this period in our last cycle, that was DeFi summer. All of DeFi was blowing up. And as DeFi was blowing up, we saw meme coins. Elon Musk started shilling Dogecoin. So there was a lot more retail euphoria taking place throughout that rally. And we haven't seen anything like that. So what makes me excited, the fact that Bitcoin is now just getting ready to leave this prior all-time high, and we haven't really even seen retail yet, that tells me that this next move coming is going to be very, very massive, and we have to be prepared to capitalize on it, because if we're not early, we're always going to be late and we're going to miss the top. So now I wanted to come over here and actually take a look at the altcoin market, and going over once again with this global M2 money supply, because I wanted to map out what I think is going to be taking place for the altcoin market, because this is excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. So this is all of the other cryptos in the market. Outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum, those are really where we're going to see the retail money start to flock, because it's always in the others that they lag the most. Bitcoin will lead, and when ETH finally starts to run, that's when this chart starts to break out as well. So generally, this one's going to lag the most. When we see a lagging chart start to break out, it's a moment of time to understand that there's a big shift taking place. And we aren't quite at that shift yet when it comes to the altcoins, and that's the point I'm trying to make here. We still need to see Bitcoin make that next big breakout. But I do believe that during that next big breakout is where we're finally going to see this market break out and actually flip its prior all-time high. Because keep in mind, guys, this is the M2 money supply. We've been mapping this out for a while. I've been talking about how the liquidity of the M2 oftentimes front runs the Bitcoin and crypto cycles. And when you look at what is the most risky chart in crypto, in my opinion, it's the crypto total market cap excluding Bitcoin and ETH, because this is all of the other altcoins and cryptos in the market. So as much as Ethereum lags Bitcoin, as much as Bitcoin takes its time to get to where it needs to go, this one lags both of those. So whenever this breaks out, that's where we are going to get our true alt season. It's always revolving around this chart. What I wanted to point out to you guys is really mapping out how similar the price action is. Now, obviously, it's going to be a little bit different. It's not as identical to maybe the Ethereum chart, but it's still the same thing. We can see the highs are totally reflective inside of this chart being the highs and the lows. There's periods where the M2 is actually going up much quicker. And that's kind of what we saw at the bottom of our bear market down here. The M2 was bouncing, going all the way back up near those range highs, and really the crypto markets were just kind of consolidating at the bottom of this accumulation trend. However, same type of stuff. When it starts to break out, you see the same patterns. When the M2 actually broke out and retested this prior high here, we didn't actually get that breakout in the altcoins. They came back up, retested that prior all-time high for the first time, and then we came back down to retest the same trend line that we've been growing on. What I think is happening now that the M2 is broken out once again, we've seen further continuation and it's starting to go parabolic. What I believe happens is Bitcoin's going to make this next big breakout. It's probably going to run to 150, 160K. And during that period, I think that Bitcoin has a very real chance of either outperforming altcoins in the short term or the altcoins finally starting to pick up a little dominance. I don't know which one. I gave you both the scenarios that I think are going to be the most likely, and it all revolves around the Bitcoin dominance chart, which we'll get into for a second. But I'm honestly thinking that what's going to take place is as Bitcoin starts to break out and as the altcoins start to break out, Once this total 3 chart actually flips this prior all-time high as new support like this, I think that it's just going to do nothing but go vertical. And that's really where I'm thinking that the profit's going to be generated in altcoins, and you're going to want to have to sell inside of that move, because this has been coiling for a long time, 4 or 5 years that we've been building this foundation. Once we break out of it, I do think that the altcoin cycle is going to be a lot more short-lived than Bitcoin. Bitcoin took its sweet time to build this support floor, to get higher highs and higher lows, all the way to the point of new all-time highs. And now that it's about to go parabolic, the altcoins, they always lag. They always take a long time. They still haven't even made a new all-time high yet. So I do think that the second they finally do flip this prior all-time high as new support, it's really just going to go vertical, and there's probably not going to be a lot of higher highs and higher lows necessarily in the same ways that we've been seeing with Bitcoin, right? All of this slow, higher high, higher low, steady, increasing like a stair step all the way up. I think that that's going to end very soon, considering we're almost at the end of this year. That's the end of where the projected 4-year cycle top is supposed to be. When we look at the M2, it's breaking out. It's in price discovery. When we look at the altcoin charts, they're just moments away from finally breaking out of their prior all-time highs. Based off of what I've seen in years past with all of the altcoin cycles I've traded, whenever the altcoins go vertical, they just go vertical. All of the slow accumulation takes place below the prior all-time high. However, once that prior all-time high becomes new support, that's really where the market's going to pick up in the biggest way. So we just want to have our positions ready to go, and understanding that we really are just moments away from this next big expanse in price that, in my opinion, is going to be fueled by retail FOMO. Now, guys, the next thing I wanted to cover over here is going to be the Bitcoin dominance. Very important chart that we're talking about right here. Now, once again, we're still looking at the same stuff. Still, once again, holding this bearish divergence on the weekly time frame. Every single one of these new higher highs it makes is still below our downtrending resistance. Even over in here, as we've made another new high right above this prior one, and we're currently sitting at 65.5%, it still is closing back below this resistance. We still haven't yet to break out and actually get a higher high on the RSI, which is an encouraging sign, because regardless if this Bitcoin dominance keeps creeping up, we're getting overextended, and there's a lot of exhaustion showing on every time frame. If we come over here, let me remove these drawing tools real quick. We can see that we've just formed another bearish divergence. In fact, this one's arguably even bigger. Well, it's obviously not going to be bigger than a weekly divergence taking place ever since October of 2023. However, if you guys notice, we've had this bearish divergence on the weekly. We have it here, we have it here, we have another peak right here, and throughout all of these peaks, the market keeps going higher. Now, just right in this period where we finally made another high and kind of sat back down on top of this prior resistance as new support, the RSI actually showed an absolutely massive bearish divergence, and this is on a 3-day time frame, so it's a little bit of a bigger time frame. So when I look at this chart and I see on the 3-day, we're getting massive bearish divergence. We've already had massive bearish divergence on the weekly time frame. I do believe that we're moments away from finally seeing the breakdown of this. And I pointed it out in my last video. It's still definitely possible that we come back up into this range high at around 70% dominance. And if that is the case, I would expect that it would just be one final kind of peak like this before it dropped. But when I'm looking at the 3-day time frame, and I'm seeing this big of a bearish divergence, and then when we're already out on the weekly, and we've had this bearish divergence that's formed for basically since October of 2023, I do think that regardless, whether it's one more peak or whether it's topping right here, we are very close to the moment that the altcoin market is finally going to shift. So, I think that at this point, Bitcoin's already had its fun, it's already ran super hard, and we are showing those signs that the altcoin market is getting ready to rotate. And when we're looking over here at this chart, showing all of those other altcoins, excluding Bitcoin, excluding Ethereum, we're seeing that we really are just on our next leg up is probably going to be the one that actually gets outside of this downtrending resistance, or horizontal, the prior all-time highs of the last cycle. Once we get this next big breakout, that's what that's going to take place as. And once this shift takes place, I do firmly believe that we're looking at the completion of this uptrend for the Bitcoin dominance. And then once this starts to sell off, we've got a pretty big drop. Obviously, your target for when we're going to actually sell off is going to be back down here at about 40% dominance. I think that the best strategy that you can play for the rest of this cycle is to long altcoins throughout this entire period as Bitcoin is getting more parabolic. And then as this starts to drop and we reject down in here and it starts to fall, I think it's going to revisit all the way back down to this support again. It's going to retest the same support that we've had for a long time. And it's at this retest that we'll probably end up seeing a bounce, and that's really where you want to take your profits, is right down here. So for me, how I'm playing the altcoin market, I really do think that this thing's going to reverse, and when that does, I'm just going to be holding my altcoins until we hit 40%. Once we hit 40%, I'm taking profit, and I'm not saying that it's done. I think that the altcoins could actually drop again like this. Maybe we complete one more capitulation before this cycle's over. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see something along the lines of this play out. However, I still think that you're better off taking profits at 40% dominance, because it's inevitable that if we're going to be dropping this far, going from 66 all the way down to 40%, altcoins are going to have massive moves throughout this period. And as this hits support again, you're going to see a bounce. And in my opinion, that bounce is going to be taking us back into this same consolidation that we were holding at the beginning of this bear market, right? Or at the beginning of the bull market. We're going to probably end up hitting 40%, bouncing into a lower high, a dead cat bounce into the same 48% resistance. And then once that happens, it's probably going to fall again. But the thing that you guys want to be aware of is this bounce is going to wreck altcoins. Even though this is a small little bounce on the Bitcoin dominance, you know, a lot of altcoins that are going to pump 10, 20, 50, 100x and stuff, they're going to go down like 80, 90+%. In the same way we saw all of the markets do this, and we haven't even seen a true alt season yet. So if the altcoins can make that big of a drop without even having run yet, imagine what the altcoins are going to do once we end up bouncing off this 40% level. In my opinion, that's where we're going to see a big shakeout in the altcoins. And the best thing that we can do is just have that preparation to take our profits when we see that support hit. That's my opinion. That's how I'm trading the market. But guys, this is the video I had for you. I wanted to map it all out, explain why I'm so bullish on crypto and why I think it's going to do so well. We are at the moment of time when that shift is about to take place, where the Bitcoin money rotates in the altcoins. And I'm excited. I've got nothing but confidence in it, and I wanted to help you guys be able to visualize it so that you can be ahead of the game and make the same profit with me. With that being said, if you found any value in this video, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. If you want to see anything I'm doing with my portfolio, buying, selling, trading altcoins, links are in the description. Go ahead and sign up for my private group. With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.